has joined us, Steve has joined us from Nevada, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He's the second of our three candidates that's coming up. And this is really the portion of his couple of days here where he's going to tell us about what he does, what he thinks is important, and so on. Normally, Sean would be introducing Steve. Sean has a meeting that he can't get out of. He will be joining us late, if at all. And Steve, there may be a few people that are coming in as well late. You just try not to look at them as they sort of make it through. So thank you for coming. These are great opportunities, I think, for us to hear from good people about what they're up to and so on. And I'm going to let you introduce.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks, Nate. Good. Well, thanks for coming to see me speak this afternoon. I'm here, as you know, for the position of associate professor at University of Guelph. And what really resonated with me researching University of Guelph is the university's commitment to improve life. So I fashioned my presentation around this phrase. And so this afternoon, I'm going to share with you my selection of teaching and research accomplishments. And I'm also going to discuss my vision for teaching and present my vision for an innovative research program here at the University of Guelph. But first, my story begins with Lego. How many here played with Lego or still play with Lego? Okay, yeah, it's like a full house. Nate, you didn't play with Lego?
All the time.
Okay. So as a child, I built fantastic cities fueled by my imagination. And today, like a kid, I still imagine and I make it reality. Now, this is a rendering of a recently completed project I did in Calgary. This is actually a green roof or amenity deck. This is in Calgary. I did everything from the streetscape to the amenity space to the green roof. And this is just a detail from that design. And you may just see this as a piece of technical data, but it's actually, there's research behind this. And I'll get technical for 2 sentences here. There's a couple ways you can drain a green roof. You can use a drain mat, or you can use a 6-inch layer of drain rock. And what I've done through years of doing green roof design is I use a hybrid of both, where I use about a 3-inch layer of drain rock above a drain mat. Because what I find is, from a maintenance point of view, oftentimes if a maintenance crew has to go in and replace a plant, there's a danger that they can actually penetrate the drain mat. And if you penetrate the drain mat, it's really expensive to repair that. So I find that a hybrid detail actually works to its advantage. And so it's this type of project where you need to deal with the challenges of a landscape architectural construction and technology. It's these type of design challenges that I bring back to the classroom to share with my students. And so just a bit about me. My professional experience spans over 20 years in education, research, design, and construction. I've typically been involved in large-scale international projects that have included resorts, multi-use commercial, residential, and parks. I've worked in offices in Winnipeg, Nanaimo, and Vancouver, and I've completed work across Canada, the United States, and in China. I established my first practice in 2008 in Vancouver, and then moving to Las Vegas, I established the Regeneration Lab in 2012. And through my experience as a landscape architect, I've seen that the design and construction of landscapes is often disconnected with the site. There is this extreme output of materials that are stripped away from the site, and then new materials are often brought into the site and then used within its construction. And so I've also observed that there's this public perception that simply by being green, like this golf course in Las Vegas, that this is nature. Well, it's not. These landscapes require massive amounts of maintenance and energy inputs to stay green. To contrast, this is one of my favorite landscapes that go back to my childhood. This is the Gilvery Trails in the Canadian Shield. It's part of the White Shell, which is on the Manitoba-Ontario border. And there's one thing about this landscape is that there's no guy out there with a leaf blower. The only work that's happening is that there's a beaver that has a little lodge up the lake there. And so this is a landscape that's based on ecology of place and is regenerative in nature. And by looking to nature for inspiration, I've realized as a landscape architect that I could make a difference that would carry through the life of a project. To illustrate, I lived and worked in Vancouver for 12 years, where I looked to nature as an inspiration to establish a regional specific design rooted in place. And so, for example, this is a project I did at University of British Columbia called Keenleyside. It was a residential project, part of a village for the university. It was part of the South Campus development. So this was multifamily. I led the team. I was the lead landscape architect on the project. I led the project from schematic design through to working drawings and design implementation. And just a little bit about the site. You'll see the property line here. The site was completely forested before this area was developed. But you'll see there's the face of the building, and you see the parking garage here. The interesting thing about the parking garage is that it took up most of the site, so I couldn't actually save any of the forest on the site. And I could have saved select trees, but there would have been a liability with that. Often when you cut down a forest and you leave a few trees standing, they're not used to growing without the other trees, and so they'll blow over in a serious storm. And so I saw this as an opportunity to actually use the materials for the construction of the project. And so what you get is an urban landscape that is inspired by nature, where only local materials have been sourced and installed. And so I went even further, and so I used the boulders that were found on through the excavation of the parking garage. The trees that were removed from the site, I was actually have them milled and use them to use in landscape features on the site. A native ornamental compatible plant palette was then used to tie the project to the surrounding forest. You can actually see the remnant of the forest in the background of that shot there. And so there can be an added cost when designing with nature. Communicating those costs, those extras to a client is absolutely important when trying to sell this type of design work. These costs, they can be controlled. So, for example, the cost of milling that lumber was actually a lot more than if we had just specified it from the lumber yard. But the client thought that was a great story to tell. The other thing is that the stone was quarried from a site within a 100-mile radius of the city, which was actually, that's not a small feat. There was, in the Vancouver market, there was Chinese stone that was always half the cost, and it was always hard to sell a client on using local stone. So again, that was another great product that we were able to use within the project. And so I'm going to change scale from the site specific to the neighborhood, where I was able to make a greater impact by designing with nature. So this is a plan for a waterfront landing, which is, have anyone been to Whistler? Okay, so this Squamish is sort of the midpoint between Vancouver and Squamish and Whistler. It's located along the Sea to Sky Highway, and it was a former brownfield site. So this entire site of the illustration was a mill. It was an industrial site. And I collaborated with a multidisciplinary team as a lead landscape architect on the project. And the neighborhood was designed on smart growth principles. Are you familiar with smart growth? Anyone? It's an approach to development that concentrates on the design of compact, walkable communities to avoid sprawl. And so there are a number of elements to the neighborhood, such as a diverse mix of housing types and a very high park and open space network of 54% for the network. But I want to focus on the lagoon. That lagoon was not there. It's all a designed component of the project. The lagoon is actually connected to the Mamquan Blind Channel, which is a tidal river that's susceptible to flooding due to a number of issues such as heavy rainfall, large snowpacks, and high tides. But at the neighborhood scale, I was able to go beyond using just materials like I did in Keenleyside and integrate a natural ecosystem of the place. And so I looked to nature and the flooding processes that the channel could provide for the site to create the lagoon. So the flooding process worked with the daily tides and served to naturally cleanse the pool, so there were no mechanical means, and to provide a healthy habitat for fish and wildlife. From the client's point of view, all this water actually increased waterfront. It tripled the amount of waterfront property that they could sell. And so that offset any cost issues from their point of view. And it also provided an amenity that they could use for marketing in terms of both visual and recreational. And so that I find designing with nature is more successful when it's designed collaboratively, because there's a team ownership. So the lagoon itself wasn't this cute feature that the landscape architect wanted. It was something that the engineer, the ecologist, and even the owner had a hand in integrating with the project. I also have found that good clients make good projects. I've realized with the right clients whose values aligned with mine, that I could design and realize projects that were not only sustainable and robust, but also regenerative. Which brings me to this diagram here and good design. And through my experiences in creative practice, good design is research informed and team-based. And whether it's the development of a green roof detail, or the decision to remove the trees and use those as materials, or even just designing a tidal lagoon for an entire neighborhood, all those things are research-based and they integrate a team. And so, again, I often find myself in the middle of these intersections with my students when it comes to both research and teaching, which leads me to my teaching accomplishments to improve life. And so I've been teaching in landscape architecture since 2005. I started as an adjunct at University of British Columbia, and then an associate professor at UNLV in 2011. I'm now the director of the UNLV's Downtown Design Center, and I also have international teaching experience that goes back to 2000. I've been teaching in kind of two realms, the sustainable design and construction, and public engagement and urban design. And something that's kind of linked both of these elements together is what I often do is cross-disciplinary. I'm currently actually teaching an architecture studio with fourth-year architecture students and sixth-year graduate-level architecture students. So I'm able to work cross-disciplinary as well. And the first project I'm going to talk about is something I did at UBC. It was a design-build project. It was a collaboration between myself and another colleague. I taught a design development studio where my students developed the design and developed the working drawings. And then my colleague then did a summer course where they actually did the construction of the project. And so we made sure we coordinated so there was like this seamless integration between both the summer and the spring and the summer studios. And then under my instruction, I had 12 graduate level students. And the challenge was to take 12 students, go from 12 different designs and work to one single design that was going to be built, because we could only build one, we couldn't build 12. And what was interesting about the challenge is that we actually treated it like a real project where the students actually had to meet with all the users of the space, field operations, and plant operations. They had to go through the design review process at the university to get the project approved. They had to go through the permitting process. And then I also had created a design panel through our own internal design review so the design could be shored up. In terms of our budget, we had no idea what our budget was. But through the design process, I challenged students to push sustainable design. And they used materials from the site. And they also developed an innovative drainage system that worked, that linked to the building and the landscape. And remember the Keenleyside project, I mentioned the wood that I had milled. Well, the students were actually able to use this because I was doing that project at the same time as this project. So it increased our budget a little bit. And so through this process, I received recognition from UBC SEEDS program for going above and beyond my regular role, where I fostered a sense of social awareness and global responsibility by providing students with hands-on research and construction, mentoring, interactive teaching, and dialogue between faculty, staff, and students. Based on the success I had at UBC, I created the same similar course curriculum for a studio dedicated to working drawings, to development of working drawings at UNLV. Projects have ranged in scale and scope from residential to community gardens, to a permanent home for UNLV's solar decathlon home, to an archaeological park in Greece. All have had a real client, and out of that list, 2 have actually been built. What differed from my experience at UBC was that I was actually able to supplement the studio by integrating what I was teaching as a seminar course. So for example, I taught structures and materials, and I tied that through with the working drawings studio. So this meant for a greater range of learning opportunities and efficiencies for the students. We were able to integrate more field trips, assignments, and research by the students served dual purposes with material serving both roles. Students found a way to link the 2 courses so they weren't working in a sense, educational silos. Another example is I the students had to develop a site survey plan in one of the other courses they were doing, and then that was tied into the studio course, so they got a better, greater range of understanding of their site by linking those two learning opportunities. It also helped the students understand how their education was linked, and this was an empowering experience for them. So in 2003, I collaborated with two colleagues on the first multidisciplinary school between the disciplines of School of Architecture at UNLV. So that included architecture, interior architecture, and landscape architecture. And I won't get into the details of the project, but this kind of serves as a shift in my role. In late 2014, I was able to establish a cross-disciplinary creative practice-based studio at UNLV, at UNLV's Downtown Design Center. That's included a mix of both undergraduate and graduate level students. Through community engagement, what I feel is an essential tool in urban design, we explore how our city and metropolitan areas can be envisioned using real-world projects. And projects have ranged in scale and scope from campus to neighborhood plans, to site-specific such as a playground, a museum, and a garden of science and technology. For example, as part of a grant-funded project through the City of Las Vegas, my undergraduate students and I have worked with the residents and stakeholders from the historic West Side neighborhood. Again, I'm back to the Lego. How many here have seen the Lego movie? Like 2 people? No, it's got to be more than that. Anyways, there's a song from the movie. Everything is awesome. Okay. Well, so when we started our project, how many know that song? Yeah, more people than actually know the movie. Okay. So when we started the project, like the characters in the movie, we thought everything was awesome for the project, but it really wasn't. There were challenges, and these are the type of challenges you wouldn't read in a textbook. The neighborhood, the historic West Side, is the heart and soul of the African American community in Las Vegas. And it's experienced decades of discriminatory planning practices. And so there was this tension between the city and the community, and we were right in the middle of it. Our objective was to study and develop a community-based neighborhood plan. And considering we live in a time when you can simply Google an answer, this was no easy task. You know, you couldn't just Google an answer for this. And I have to admit, my students, they actually did Google neighborhood plans, and they did find neighborhood plans. But what they realized when they started looking through these plans was that they were very specific to each community that they were designed for. And so how did we get past this tension and find the information that we needed to get past these issues? Well, to succeed, we needed to go beyond the classroom, beyond textbooks and beyond Google, and we needed to actually meet with the community. We needed to listen, and we needed to hear their vision and aspirations for a place that they called home. And we did this through a series of community workshops. This approach was necessary to discover what made the historic West Side very unique, and more importantly, to build a relationship with the community. The students didn't face this challenge alone. I had assembled a design team because it was a grant-funded project that included urban designers, engineer, architect, landscape architect, artist, transportation specialist, and also School of Architecture faculty, and also both international and local consultants on the team. And so the challenge that lay before them forced the students to come together and to work collaboratively, to work not only with the community, but as a project team and with each other. So all of a sudden, this project became real. Like this drawing that the students produced, this was their version of the final plan. And it was very real to them. They really truly understood what was unique to the West Side. And the context of a very real project forced the students to gain an understanding of the place that they were designing, the place that they were studying. Here they learned that ideas were either judged good or bad. There was no in between. They either got an A or they got an F, not from me, but from the community. And so each meeting the students had helped them understand the essential ideas amongst the overwhelming and often competing ones. And as a result, by the final presentation, the students stood with confidence because they had discovered the common community goals. And so the students' thoughtful approach to listen was felt by the community. The tension, the criticism transformed. And through this experience, each of their strengths were called upon. what was most amazing is that this experience brought out strengths that I think a lot of the students didn't know that they had. For example, I witnessed Jonathan, an undergraduate student, much like some of you here, get past his fears of speaking in public. He was really shy. He couldn't speak in front of his class. But by the end of the project, he asked to be part of the final presentation to a room full of 100 community members that really had a lot to say about their home. And I saw students get past their fear of drawing, to get past looking for an easy answer online, and to think critically. Most important, I observed acts of leadership from most of the students. And now these are the tools that are necessary to excel in professional practice. There was something about the challenges of working with the community that brought the students to life and together. This type of collaboration has the power to push students beyond their individual limits, to push students like you. And so what I recommend is, through your studies, that you seek a diversity of experiences that gives you the courage and the confidence and the resources and the tools that let you reach your potential. The impact of my teaching, my research-informed teaching has had results. For my work with the students in the historic West Side, I was nominated and selected to be one of 4 UNLV faculty to address the 2015 Incoming Freshmen at UNLV Creates, which is a celebration specifically for all of our UNLV incoming freshmen to highlight creativity, inspiration, and discovery in such a way that new students will be energized about the transformative opportunities of a college degree. So the funding also provided other opportunities. And I'm just not talking about the West Side now. Out of all the grants I've brought in at the Downtown Design Center, they've included public exhibitions, guest lectures. I've been able to bring in a couple of former alumni from University of Guelph, Jeff Cutler from Space to Place and Joseph Fry from HAPA Collaborative. It also covered students' costs and materials. We also have had opportunities to do traveling. We did a trip about this time last year in Seattle. Luckily, everyone had signed their waiver forms. So, benefits of service learning. This past spring, actually 2 of my students won an AIA Student Award for their project based on my current neighborhood plan. And I'm proud to say that was the only project in this year's AIA Awards to receive an honor of award. And so I'm going to move on to my research accomplishments to improve life. My current appointment, as I mentioned, is a leadership position. I'm the director of UNLV's Downtown Design Center, where I focus the work of the Downtown Design Center towards regenerative and sustainable communities through collaborative research, design, and action. The Downtown Design Center is not on campus, but it's located downtown in the historic 5th Street School. This is probably the oldest, most historic building in Las Vegas. You're probably looking at this, you wouldn't realize that this is not it's not a casino, right? I think everyone has this perception of what Las Vegas is, but this is it's an old school that has a certain regional approach to architecture. It was built with surplus materials and workers from the Hoover Dam back in the day. So through my leadership, starting in December 2014, I've established over $400,000 in research grants that have contributed to collaborative and community engagement learning opportunities for both students and faculty. I currently have about $160,000 grants that are pending. And in addition, since joining UNLV in 2011, I've been a co-investigator on 6 additional grants of totaling over $100,000. Through my primary research, I seek to understand how designers can utilize narrative and storytelling through the design process. Capturing and recording these aspirations and visions of different various groups in design presents many challenges. And so what I have here is a consequence triangle that I set up for many projects. So this is a recent project I'm just wrapping up right now called NARA, Northwest Area Residents Association. I assemble a design team. There's the student team, and then there's the community themselves. But you come in and make yourself comfortable. Don't worry about it. And then I find that each group comes to the design team and they bring different experiences. I find that the professionals, they've been broken by practice in a way. They come with certain rules, like where they'll play it safe in many ways. But I find the students come with this energy and they're willing to break the rules because they didn't realize that there were rules. And then the community has an intimate relationship with the site. So everybody comes together to share their sense of narrative for the place. And so, using these appropriate methods, I find that there can be common objectives and patterns that can be found amongst these competing views. And so there's three ways I look at narrative: generating a narrative for decision making, designing that supports the narrative, and using the narrative to better understand the context. And so generating a narrative for decision making. For example, I was commissioned, the DDC, we got a grant for the Springs Preserve to help them redesign their playground that had outgrown its life cycle. This condition was quite evident, and meeting with the client, if I just talked to the client, they had a very good understanding of who their user group was, what parents they felt they knew what the kids wanted, and what the adults wanted, like the grandparents and parents would bring their kids to the site. They had an idea of what they thought they should spend on the reconstruction of the playground, and they had a whole bunch of maintenance needs. One of them was absolutely no sand in the playground. And they had a whole bunch of liability issues that they wanted to deal with. So, I had to establish a framework for capturing the narrative that went beyond just the client group. And so, as part of the process, I did a design charrette with kids and parents. And so what I did is I occupied the parents because I didn't want the parents to interfere with what the kids were doing, and I had them doing surveys as they sat on the outside of the edge of the room, and the kids just they answered one question: what does play mean to them? And they built models, and they did drawings, they did all sorts of stuff, and then that information was documented. And so out of the three groups, we were able to actually gather pieces of information. The interesting thing was, three top things came out from the kids' point of view is that they needed to have sand in the playground, which was one of the things the client said, no sand. So, but that was important to discover that, because the client realized that, sand's important, and how do we deal with it from a maintenance issue? So we're able to resolve that. Another thing that happened, and I won't get into all the details of this, but the idea that the client had for cost was kind of off. And there was one big win for us in the project, is that they realized they needed to get more money to do what they needed to do. They also got past a lot of the, you see the word climbing in there. They thought that the parents would have an issue with liability issues, with challenges for kids, but that was something that really came through the study, that both kids and parents wanted more challenges for kids. So if you were to go to see the playground today, it is the most climbable playground that's at least in Las Vegas. And so some of the successes, again, I mentioned the increased budget, the climbability, and the fact that there was sand. The other thing that was great about this was that I was able to generate two other grants totaling approximately $40,000 in addition to this grant afterwards as a repeat sponsor. Now, moving on to design that supports the narrative. I've mentioned my work in the historic West Side. And this is a good example of the West Side. You got the photo from the late 50s, which would have been the height of the historic West Side, and an image of today. And so there's something that's really apparent to me in terms of this community, aside from the highway, which is very obvious, that was added to the neighborhood in the early 70s, which was typical of neighborhoods that were discriminated against. Was because does someone see a big difference between these two air photos? Something that's missing in this air photo? It's the trees. There are no trees in this neighborhood anymore. And you can judge the health of a neighborhood based on the amount of trees in the neighborhood. So even when I started to take on this project, I just looked at these air photos and knew something was wrong. The other thing that startled me when I took on this project was that since the mid-90s, my neighborhood plan was going to be the 5th neighborhood plan for the area. Now, these things usually have a shelf life of 20, 25 years. What was wrong that there were so many plans within a short period of time? Why were all the other plans gathering dust? Because none of the plans had actually been vetted through the community. What happened was the community would show up for an event, and they would be told what was going to be happening in their community. So my approach to generating narrative from the community and then designing to support the narrative from the community went a long way to building trust in a community where building trust where there was very little for outsiders. It also provided credibility for me as a designer and as a director of the Downtown Design Center with the city. It translated into another $30,000 grant for grafting the plan into the city's downtown master plan. Another under $50,000 for establishing a form-based code for the Washington Live Corridor project, which actually came out of this report. $25,000 for establishing the first mayor's design symposium. And another $100,000 to establish another neighborhood plan for another neighborhood, which I'm working on right now. So moving on to narrative to better understand the context. This is the project I'm just wrapping up now called NARA. It's a rural Las Vegas neighborhood currently surrounded by threats of urban development. So you have, this is a typical street, but you have infill development that's all HOA based, and you've got these, you basically have a fence, you gated communities taking over a very rural neighborhood in Las Vegas. The stories, experiences, and views of the people have once again become the foundation for the project to understand the context and to respond in a manner that addresses the community needs. Because a lot of people actually ride horses through the neighborhood, and this isn't very conducive to that. And so in addition to the funding providing a greater range of learning opportunities for the students, the project has also helped to build infrastructure for the Downtown Design Center, which has included employment opportunities, computer and software acquisition, project material supplies, and continued public recognition and credibility with the city. So it's also led to opportunities for me to serve on the Mayor's Urban Design Awards, and I've also been appointed by City Council to the Citizen Advisory Committee to the Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency. So jumping into my secondary research, in 2007, I contributed to the book entitled Agriculture Urbanism, Handbook for Building Sustainable Food and Agricultural System in 21st Century Cities. Now, I led the chapter on urban design, where I led my team where we defined what agriculture urban is, which is an emerging planning policy and design framework to integrate food systems within our urban environment. And so the movement has been acknowledged by numerous authors, including April Phillips in her book, Designing Urban Agriculture, and Andres Duany from DPZ in his book, Garden Cities, Theory and Practice of Agrarian Urbanism, to name a few. So while at UNLV, I've actually continued this research as my secondary stream, resulting in a series of peer-reviewed papers, a funded project, and design awards. And so a sponsored grant by the Nevada Community Foundation for $50,000 was gained to study social housing and programs in Las Vegas, to provide for the development of applied research case study, which related to my work on agriculture urbanism. And so my role as a co-investigator involved all aspects of the research from specific for me for landscape architecture, agriculture urbanism, and regenerative design. And so my early research for this project was also the basis for a series of a poster presentation at the Second International Conference on Food Studies, which then developed into a published paper in the actual journal itself. The project also served as a model for collaborative competition entry as part of a Living Cities Residential Towers for the 21st Century Design Competition. So another project spun out of it, which was the Greenpoint Food District in Brooklyn, New York, which ultimately became another peer-reviewed publication. And so my research has had a direct impact on the community of Las Vegas to illustrate my approach to community engagement. Where others have failed over the last 25 years in the West Side, I've been able to navigate the charged public tensions in the historic West Side and build positive relationships within the community. The report, the 100 Plan for the Historic Community, has been adopted by Council and integrated into the city's recent Vision 2045 Downtown Master Plan, where it serves the public good by protecting the neighborhood's interests and guiding the social and economic development. The 100 Plan has also attracted local and national attention. It was included in an article dedicated to the neighborhood in the Las Vegas Weekly. and then the subject of an in-depth article in Landscape Architecture magazine. And more recently, on the eve of the special election for the ward where the West Side is, I was invited to speak on KNPR's State of Nevada to discuss the plan and the benefits for the neighborhood. Subsequent funding has led to the development of the Mayor's Symposium. That was 3 years ago. We're actually just planning the third annual Mayor's Symposium, and this is just a list of some of the speakers who spoke that very first year. This event has brought the city leaders together into an event to help provide an education for them on issues that are affecting the city of Las Vegas. And so the cool thing about all these projects I've just shown you is that they've all received design awards. The Springs Preserve project on Kids Play has received 2 design awards from the Nevada chapter of the ASLA, an Award of Honor, and Project of the Year. The Las Vegas Food District received numerous rewards, one from the AIA and 2 from the ASLA Nevada chapter. And then the 100 Plan itself swept the ASLA Nevada chapter awards in 2015, receiving the Award of Honor, Viewer's Choice Award, and Project of the Year. So that brings me to my vision for teaching to improve life. So my teaching philosophy provides the foundation for all the courses I teach, whether it's at the master's or the bachelor level. I believe that teaching is about providing guidance that builds confidence and also promotes personal inquiry. I also consider that learning through practice, learning by doing, builds confidence, and especially through collaboration with others, and it accelerates the process in a beneficial manner. And I support the philosophy by integrating the following concepts, and I'm going to get into them, but I notice many of these are actually tied to the 7 learning outcomes here through the undergraduate program at the University of Guelph. And so through the following slides, I'm just going to show you how I've integrated them into my last spring studio, where my students have been developing projects as part of the NAR community in Las Vegas. And so the first one is, I believe learning should be fun. This is this lesson that I learned from my very best teachers going through University of Manitoba. An enjoyable classroom to me is a positive environment for student participation, engagement, and learning. Landscape architecture is outdoors, so I take it outdoors in a regular manner. Now I know, and this is in addition to classroom lectures and guest lecturers, but various field trips, travel, walking tours. I know there are challenges to doing that in a winter city like Guelph, but I'm from Winnipeg. And don't let the fact that I'm in Las Vegas fool you. There's a way, I think, of front-loading outdoor trips through the fall term, most definitely, and then trying to do some sort of trip somewhere in the winter term when you want to escape the cold of Guelph in the winter, I'm sure. So in February, that trying to make a trip somewhere down to like maybe Las Vegas might work. So the next one, passion. An effective teacher is passionate about their subject and equally passionate about communicating their topic to others. And so I typically provide opportunities that provide the same passion to the students. So for example, here as part of the design charrette, here are some students, they're actually working, they're doing a design exercise to kind of gain some information from the community members. They're looking for the narrative, and you can see everyone's having a really good time here. And so, and again, I think this is what makes this work real. The students link, they're able to deal with issues that they can't normally ignore because these are the faces of who they're designing for, and they can't ignore what's important to the community. So it gives them that, it fuels that passion for them. So a successful teacher is able to convey information to students in a way that they will comprehend. And so one method, for example, is I often have students be part of the knowledge generation process for their project. They're not just relying on me for the information, but they're part of generating it. So they're often informing me about the project, which gives them a sense of empowerment through the process. And again, what's important to me is that this builds confidence for them. A teacher must be friendly and easy to talk to. For example, different environments stimulate dialogue, and there's nothing like a field trip to a barbecue place in the middle of the neighborhood you're designing to meet with a client or to meet with a community member. There's something about sitting at a table with food that gets people to open up and ask questions that they maybe wouldn't normally do if this guest had actually come down to the center and we had a more formal discussion. Efficiency. A teacher must be prepared and organized in advance of teaching. And so this goal goes a long way at establishing accountability and credibility with the students. So for example, organizing a 3-day design charrette with students is one such example on how I try to have the students understand how important it is in being prepared instead of just winging it. It's essential to keep course content current because understanding current trends leads to innovations. And so in this context of the Nara neighborhood, this is a neighborhood scale project, and it helped the students understand the impact of both positive and negative of current urban development in Las Vegas. And through this process, they've been able to explore the development of innovations for the neighborhood. So examples include how to integrate horse trails within this right-of-way, how to integrate, or what's the difference between typical commercial development and a retail village development, the benefits of various community centers or there are different models of community center from a standalone to a campus, and then urban versus rural design character. Next, the teacher must allow room for modifications to a course to address student needs. So the first time I ran the design charrette at UNLV, I realized a lot of students, this is like prepping leading up to it, I realized a lot of students couldn't draw under pressure. And in a design charrette, you're kind of forced to do things within an hour or 2 hours here or there. You have to respond very quickly. I also found some students couldn't draw, and so just instead of just leaving everyone to the wolves, because I had the funding, I was able to address those issues that weren't necessarily, I didn't necessarily plan for them, but I was able to bring in Richard Scott, who does a workshop on rendering, and I was able to bring him in, and he ran a workshop with the students to help prepare them for the challenges that they were going to be facing. Which leads me to the challenges. Presenting challenges to students that force them to think on their own, engages and sharpens the tools that they will need to use beyond their studies. I feel that the best learning occurs when it's outside of your comfort level. And so here's an example. This is a design workshop. There's so much going on. You often have to split off in many teams to develop different aspects of a neighborhood. And so I had a couple students here branch off to look at redeveloping or redesigning what a developer had done in terms of a large piece of property. And they had essentially about an hour to do this, to redesign a little neighborhood. And which would be, just imagine you have to do that with the students here. If you just think you have to redesign a neighborhood in an hour, and then you have to present in front of the community group that's there. Of course, I didn't throw them to the wolves again. I was prepared. I had these little blocks made up, so it was just a matter of trying to lay out the blocks and draw it out. But what that challenged is it forced the students, instead of overthinking something, to actually work fast and adapt to a challenging environment, which then it gave them courage and it helped build confidence. A teacher must also recognize the personality and characteristics that distinguishes one student from another. Each student has his or her own talents and ideas to contribute to the learning process. And so as I've discussed with my work with the students on the West Side, I've created opportunities to foster students' strengths and to help build courage that leads to confidence throughout the term. I also believe that a teacher must encourage positive group interactions, and collaboration has the power to elevate student strengths as there is a diversity of talent and expertise that a partnership presents in any subject. And so this is an image of the NARA team of students, and it's kind of meant to show the power of everybody working together. Imagine if if I eliminated the design professionals and the faculty, and I had my class of 11 students, and each student was responsible for designing a project. I think they're going to get a richer opportunity or educational component through that process, working as a team, working as an individual in a silo. And then, of course, humor, something that Nate has no idea about how to use effectively. And I just wanted to point out that bike parking is not allowed in this space. So used effectively, humor breaks the ice and encourages participation. So, and again, I feel that I got that sense. I feel like there's a sense of humor here, that the school has that personality, reading the handbook. So I also find that it's essential to provide ongoing advice and support to your students, as it gives them the confidence, resources, and the skills that they need to reach their potential. And so, like, these were the two students that were working on redesigning that neighborhood within an hour. And it wasn't like I left them alone, as I was there to watch over their shoulder and step in to help them get past any rough patches. And so finally, my vision for research to improve life. So again, my approach to design and experience running a successful design center will ground my research program. And so it's my understanding that through this position, that it's linked to architectural construction and technology, and then these related subtopics. And so this will serve to what my research is going to be based on terms of storytelling and narrative through landscape, architectural construction, and technology. And then this overall approach will be then supported by the innovation of the program. And so where? Well, I want to take advantage of the location of the city of Guelph. There's the strength in rooting the research to place. For example, Winter Cities, this brings me back to my home. Again, being from Winnipeg, I understand what this means for design. I also feel that there's opportunities to explore urban growth and pressures on rural communities in this area, and for the landscape and urban fabric as a living laboratory. In terms of why am I going to do this work? Well, I'm going to focus my research mission to promote a shift to sustainable and regenerative communities through collaborative research, design, and action. And then in terms of what, I'm going to build off the current successes that I've had at UNLV, where I've built a successful design center through funded projects, job creation, and the fostering sense of community. I'm going to collaborate with existing infrastructure of the school. So there's two ways to do this. I can come in and try and establish my own, or I can come in and try and work with existing infrastructure. And I often find, I think that's the most successful thing. I think sometimes people can come in and want to reinvent the wheel, and I think there's some good infrastructure here. But I think that's something, either way, there's a way of establishing financially sustainable lab through funded research. And then I'll look to build and foster strategic relationships within the community. Building research infrastructure will include high-level entrepreneurship, engaging the business community, and strengthening partnerships. There'll be different levels the relationships will serve different roles. So they'll be from collaboration. So I'll look to the provincial association to find partnerships within the profession of landscape architecture, and then I'll look to like municipalities, for example, City of Guelph, Toronto, for opportunities to sponsorship and to collaborate. And then I anticipate building this infrastructure to start building these relationships will take about 2 years to establish. Again, a big component of what I do is community engagement and service learning, as it's an integral part of this research. Collecting narratives is demanding, and exploring new methods and refining current ones requires infrastructure. So opportunities to engage is time consuming, but experience has shown that there are certain advantages of a project in terms of scope when you involve students in that research, and they take a central role. Also like to integrate technology with storytelling and narrative to be explored. For example, I was part of a team where we created an app on Vancouver trees. This came out of me teaching, co-teaching with a colleague at UBC in Plant ID, and this app was meant to be as a tool for the students in the class, but also meant to be a tool for professionals. It contains 175 trees. We started the project as a book, but realized it would actually be more beneficial for both students and the profession if it became a field tool that you could carry on site and that you could update as the years progress. And the same type of technology could be integrated with storytelling, like what sort of digital and virtual tools could be developed for a successful public engagement. I also want to explore the way practice is experiencing rapid change. The interesting thing I've noticed, particularly as a practitioner, is I think if I look back to when I graduated, the model that many offices were using, it was a pretty standard traditional role. But I find in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, the recession really changed things, particularly in the United States. I think practice has really looked at, they've started to reinvent themselves and trying to figure out how to adapt to our changing time, certainly with the way technology and millennials have hit the workforce. And so how do I ensure that my research on storytelling and narrative stays relevant and applicable for practice? I think that's something that's key because it has such a link to practice. Now, reporting the findings of research is essential, and it must have international significance. And I do have an active international network of professional and academic contacts to share with. For example, I was invited last year to be part of Glow Design, which was World Youth Design Forum as part of the inaugural Redesign Forum at the 2017 Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It was the first time that design became a component of the Fringe Festival. And as part of the forum, we discussed current issues impacting creativity and design education while exploring design curricula as shared by a group of educators from the all world continents. So out of the group of 12 of us, there was someone from each continent in the world, and we discussed issues being faced in design and design education. And so I've been invited back to the 2018 Educators Forum this October in Singapore. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be in Singapore, where this year's topic will be the design and craft, rethinking the craft of design and design of craft. And so in addition to my international connections, since 2000, I've been the project landscape architect for the Iklina archaeological project in Greece, which is run under the direction of the University of St. Louis, University of Missouri, St. Louis. I've been exploring the potential of design intervention with archaeological sites as a research topic. And for example, I used the site for exploration through a design development studio at UNLV. And the intervention of an archaeological site, you're often dealing with issues of preservation, reconstruction, interpretation, storytelling, and narrative. And I've witnessed that most archaeological sites have or will experience degradation once they've been exposed. And I think there exists this great potential for landscape architecture to protect and celebrate these sites through innovations not yet discovered. And so there's an opportunity here for a study abroad to explore storytelling and narrative through another context, to go outside of place of Guelph and to go to another country. And I have put together this program some years ago, but never actually implemented it, where we would have access to the archaeological site. Now, the interesting thing about Iklina site is near Pylos, is in the Peloponnese. The interesting thing about the site is it's the first. All palace sites of its Mycenaean period is from the 1175 BC. Mycenaean sites. All the great palaces were excavated in the late 60s, early 70s. This is the first settlement to actually be unearthed, and it's yielding incredible finds. The oldest written text in Western civilization was found at the Iklina archaeological site. So I think there's a great opportunity for that. And finally, I want to talk about leadership. It's one process that I've learned through experience and planning, action, and reflection. Leadership is something not to be confused with management. It's about taking responsibility and building trust and mutual respect. It's about building relationships and providing inspiration. Leadership is about empowering those around you. And as part of the research process, here's my researcher to the left and 3 of my students from last spring's studio project. I got funding where we traveled to the Southwest Oral Histories conference, where the students talked about what it was like gathering narrative and stories from the community and then how that integrated the design process. And so instead of me standing up and talking about it, it was an opportunity for my students to take front and center stage and share those experiences. Again, it was about building courage and confidence in them and to improve life. So with that, I'd like to thank you once again for spending time in your busy schedules to see my presentation. And I'd like to welcome any questions you may have.
No way, boss. It's your job to come up here. That was a wonderful question.
Oh, thanks. I was waiting for like a joke or something from you, and you left me hanging.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, yes. Okay, no
There
questions?
will be questions. You're not going anywhere.
Okay.
My hand on, that's
Okay,
fine.
yes.
And thank you, Nate, for just jumping in there. I had a little thing to deal with. So, great
No, thanks.
presentation.
I'm glad you were able to sneak back in.
Yeah, great presentation. Lots of tidbits to bite on. I see we have representation from all our programs here, which is great. Landscape architecture, rural planning development, capacity development extension, and maybe all of the LA faculty are here, which is great. And obviously, we love having all students join us from the graduate and undergraduate program on landscape architecture as well. Who wants to jump in with the first question, other than John Fitzgibbon? He always gives us the first one. John gives us the first. Oh, we got one. Oh, good. Someone else.
I have a two-part question.
Okay.
The first part is there like a particular course or a topic of education that you'd like to teach here at the school?
Yes.
Steve, before you answer, Declan's a third-year BLA.
Okay, perfect.
Third-year BLA.
Okay. Well, okay, so apparently my superpower is teaching design and construction. So I really like the notion of taking Design Studio and teaching the process of working drawings. And I do a 3-iterative process. So students have to develop a design within 2 weeks. They present that design, and then they spend the rest of the term working to working drawings. And so then they have three submissions that are spaced out through the term. I did that at UBC with 13-week term. I understand this is a 12-week term. UNLV is a 16-week term. So it's pretty intensive, but getting students to focus on getting a design together within the first 2 weeks forces them to make some major decisions and then start to detail the process. And you will find that the design, even though they've come up with a design, they realize that they're still designing and refining that design. So some designs can look very different from the original design concept, but it's that concept that carries through. So, and then what I was able to do at UBC, which I found very beneficial, is it upped the quality. And at UBC that course was a graduate level. At UBC was at UNLV it was an undergraduate level. So I've taught it at both levels. So at the undergraduate level, I was able to integrate courses such as materials and structures. And again, there were benefits for then the students doing extra research, extra field trips. So then they realized their assignments would actually benefit their studio as well. So that's one aspect that I feel really comfortable with. The other aspect is the work that I've been doing at the Downtown Design Center. It's really about the grant work, and lucky for me, I've got experience in neighborhood planning, and so I've been able to integrate that at a cross-disciplinary. So to me, there's as a program here, you've got a number of different programs, so I see opportunity for cross-disciplinary work and maybe some sort of studio or seminar course that brings the disciplines together.
Yeah, you really teed up the second part of my question well. You spoke on like the cross-disciplinary work you've done, both in like your private practice as well as the teaching experience with landscape architecture and architecture students, which I think is great. It's obviously a huge part of the profession is working with others. And so my question is here, with absence of our architecture program, do you see an opportunity to come in for, say, a construction course and collaborate with the engineering students here at the University of Guelph?
Yeah, I think that would be, because working in practice, you're always working with an engineer. They're doing reviews of your drawings. I think there's a level, because the way I teach the course right now, at UBC, I was able to integrate with engineering for the stuff that we actually built. UNLV, I haven't been able to do that, or I wasn't able to do that when I was teaching that. And I always found that experience would have been just enriching even more, because students would have then gotten feedback on their details in a way that would have made them seem even more real.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Larry?
I hope this doesn't seem too sort of cheeky. You got a lot of stuff going on in Las Vegas. Why aren't you call?
I always find that the most unfair question, but I could tell I think I detect a slight Manitoban accent, I think.
Yeah,
So I'll let that one go. So there's a few reasons. You might detect my slight Canadian accent from Winnipeg. The move to the U.S. it's been exciting, but I've never seen it as a permanent move, because I'm Canadian and I miss Canada. Both my wife and I miss Canada. To me, that's essential. The other thing is, the reputation of University of Guelph. I've come across, through my professional career, working with alumni from University of Guelph. Both, I don't know if you saw in the slides, but both Joe Fry and Jeff Cutler, both alumni who have incredible practices in Canada. I was able to bring them down through funded work to Las Vegas. And it's one of the most established, top-rated programs in the country. Why would I not want to leave Las Vegas to come here? So.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of funding, that's really great. How do you see navigating a funding kind of environment in Canada? It's a whole lot.
It's a whole, yeah, I know, and that's why I said I think it will take me 2 years to actually figure out that machine of funding. Because to me, it's about relationships. I got very lucky at the Downtown Design Center. I inherited my first grant from my predecessor. What scared me about the grant, though, was that it was based purely on student work for the West Side, and I saw what was going on the West Side, and I got nervous, and I had done that work, and so I was able to rewrite the grant and develop the team and program and scope of work that I wanted. And I got very lucky because it was very charged. Like the first hour, you could the design charrette, people were sitting like this, and I said something like, "How many here have participated in the design charrette?" And 80% of the people put up their hand, and someone yelled, "And what the are you going to do different for us?" And that's how charged it was. But getting through that process, where we went from that to hugs, gave me credibility with the city, and it kind of fast-tracked that process in grants with the city. I doubt there's the historic West Side in Guelph that's going to provide that kind of project. So it's going to take some time, but I'm up for that challenge because I've got the experience and I've done it before.
Now you make me want to uncross my arms.
No. No. Well, you made me think of that, but you had a smile, so it's okay.
Jen?
Are you able to maintain some of the funding or grants that you currently have in Vegas if you were to come here?
Well,
Would you have to abandon those projects?
yeah, that's. I haven't stoked a fire on those, so I don't know. From what I understand, because the contracts are all through the university. If I were to say I'm leaving, well, put it this way: when my predecessor left, he had a grant he had established. He was able to carry that grant through. So, from what I understand, I could continue the grants that I have on my plate. Having said that, though, UNLV is a little bit of like the last remnant of the Wild West, and so they can. I've seen it where faculty members stepped up and said, "I want to finish this." So, but I'm not going to count on that. I'm in a good place where my grants are. I try and finish them by each because it's essentially I'm establishing a grant per term, so I'm trying to wrap up each grant with each term. So if I had the opportunity to move here, chances are I would have wrapped up all my grants, and if not, I'd be on the tail end of them. So.
Cheryl?
I'm curious about you're going from narrative to the basics of design and pulling out pieces from the narrative. So do you have a specific methodology that you use to identify those pieces from the narrative, or how do you? Yeah,
well, through my process, I'll set up a triangle, like I said, and I'm trying to figure out who the dialogue groups are, and then through the process, through public work, I'll use an exercise like the now how exercise, because oftentimes you'll talk to a community group, and so the NAR community, for example, the first meeting I showed up, crossed arms, weary of some stranger coming in, and the attitude was, well, what if we don't want anything to change in our neighborhood? Then you don't have to write your report. You can just, and I'm like, no, then I have to document what it is you don't want to have changed, and that'll be, okay. And then it was like, okay, well, we don't want anything to change, but if you actually got them talking, so the now how exercise, I actually give people stickies, and they have, and this is usually runs with students moderating each table, a green sticky, a red sticky, and they write down what's happening in the neighborhood now, what they like and what they dislike. And then I have them look at the wow, which is the future. So they figure out what they'd like to see happen in the neighborhood. So they might be telling me they don't want anything to change, but then they start writing all these things that they'd like to see happening in the future. And then I ask them basically, how do you connect the now to the wow? Right? How do you make that happen? And then they take initiative in what their future is. And then so through that process, I'm able to then pull out the narrative. So for the West Side, for example, that was a community that was, I had someone from the councilman's office tell me, he said, what's going to happen in the West, what you're going to experience will go far deeper than anything you will understand. This is something that's within the African American community in Las Vegas. There's so much divide and so much hard feeling that even within the community they can't agree on things. And so there were groups that were at odds with each other, but even amongst that wide range of material, we were able to pull out common things that everyone could get behind. There were some things that not everyone agreed on, but the revitalization of the historic downtown street, which is pretty much vacant right now, was something that was number one, that even the groups that hated each other within that community came to agreement on. So that's kind of one piece of the methodology, and pulling through those narratives and establishing, and then retesting that, using those same exercises to retest within the neighborhood to make sure that we're actually understanding. It's not a one-time show where we go and we listen and we walk away. I know a lot's based on scope of work and whether we can actually run a series of workshops, but I like to run multiple workshops to make sure that we're hearing the same thing, and we go back. So then there's the design process where we go back and say, this is what we heard, is this what you're envisioning? And so there's all these different layers of picking up the story and the narrative through the process. So I hope that sort of answers your question. I probably talk your ear off, but.
Let's get, you used the term collaboration.
Yes.
It's got a lot of different meanings to different people.
Yes. I'm not, okay, so collaboration means working with others. So, in terms of my practitioner, as a practitioner, I run a limited liability company, but I don't hire staff because I use my practice as my own, it's almost like a hobby, because I like to do the work, I like to do the details, right? So I'm working as an individual, but I'm part of the design team, so I'm working with the architects and engineers, we're collaborating on that aspect. We're both pushing and pulling on the project in certain ways to benefit what we bring to the table. So there's that. That's my one extreme range, and the only reason I do that is because that's almost like a hobby. When it comes to my research, there's the collaboration with my students, right? I make sure that they're part of the process, but then there's bringing in the design professionals. So I make sure, because being collaborative means everyone has like superpowers that they bring to a team. And so you're going to get a richer result when you bring a breadth of experience together. And so to me, that's really what collaborative is. Being collaborative is bringing those people together, having that dialogue, and doing it together. So with a charrette, it's not like you're going to have the architect go off, the landscape architect go off, and the engineer, the transportation, everyone go off, do what they think they talked about, and come back and have different. This is actually everyone sitting at the table discussing, pushing and pulling, talking about the benefits, talking about what's better for the project, getting past perceptions, luggage. Like I find the professionals can come in with a very safe approach, whereas then the students are like, well, what about this? What about that? And so it starts questioning the professional's response. The other thing too, as I find, by bringing in professionals as part of the design team, oftentimes I'll say things to students and they won't believe me. But then the professionals come in and independently back up what I've said, and we've not had that meeting beforehand. It just happens. So again, it helps enriching that collaborative experience. So then the students start to break some of their false perceptions of what collaboration might be, or teamwork. And again, collaboration may mean a group project in student world. And I often find that group work might be a dirty word. And I really look at collaboration as a team. Everyone has a role. Everyone has certain superpowers that they can focus on and produce a better product at the end. So I hope that answers that.
questions for Steve? Maybe up to
Okay.
tomorrow, we have faculty and staff questioning in the morning, or an opportunity for those faculty and staff that want to visit with us. Then you're going to have some time with the students at lunch hour.
Perfect.
For questions for the students, and then you have a formal interview in the afternoon. So I'd say thank you.
Okay, no, thank you.
Questions? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for everyone for the opportunity.